Peace, everyone. My name is Mumtana Ansari, and today I am going to start a read along to the book Secrets of Divine Love, A Spiritual Journey into the Heart of Islam by A. Helwa. And that is the cover of the book. The back cover reads, "Are you longing to experience a more intimate and loving relationship with the divine? Secrets of Divine Love draws upon the spiritual secrets of the Quran, ancient mystical poetry, and stories from the world's greatest prophets and spiritual masters to help you reignite your faith, overcome your doubts, and deepen your connections with God. Through the use of scientific evidence, practical exercises, and guided meditations, you will develop the tools and awareness needed to discern and overcome your negative inner critic that prevents you from experiencing God's all-encompassing love. The passages in this book serve as a compass and guiding light that returns you to the source of divine peace and surrender. Through the principles and practices of Islam, you will learn to unlock your spiritual potential and unveil your divine purpose. Secrets of Divine Love uses a rational yet heart-based approach towards the Quran that not only enlightens the mind, but inspires the soul towards deeper intimacy with God." The ISBN number is 978-1-734-2312-0-5. It says it's $24.95, but I got this off Amazon. I don't think I paid $25. I may have paid about $18 or something like that. But you can check it out and see. So the reason I got this book, I just happened upon it. I was in this Facebook group for Muslims, and it was just sort of mentioned almost. And so I saw the title of it, and it struck me because from what I've learned, I've been Muslim for like over 48 years, my whole life. And what I've found is that anytime you see something that has to do with divine love, then it has to do with tasawwuf, or what people call Sufism. And I'm not a mutasawwuf, but that's only because I have not disciplined myself or like actively and consistently going that route, or try to have learned to go that route. But I absolutely think the tasawwuf is the essence of Islam and what every Muslim should be aspiring to learn in order to be closer to Allah. Now, also the reason that I opted to get this book, I went on Amazon when I saw the title on the Facebook group, looked it up, and went through the comments, and like everyone, I think it had like a 5-star or like a 4 point something, and so it seemed like it was really good. So that of course caught my attention. But also, although it is based in Islam, I don't think from a technical perspective, because again, I don't know if this author is Sufi or Mutasawwuf or not, but it doesn't seem to come from like that more technical route of Islam. It seems to be much more of a love-based, like spiritual, as it said, based path of Islam. And also, from what I saw in the reviews and such, it said like you don't have to be Muslim to appreciate this book, which I guess goes into it being love and spiritual based. So the other thing I want to say is that I am proud. I'm going to attempt to read one chapter per video. That's my intentions, to read one chapter per video, and I think I may upload like 2, maybe 3 videos here to my YouTube channel, and then the others will probably be on my Patreon account, which is where, I'll have other read alongs for like, nonfiction and fiction books that people may find interesting and may want some companionship when reading. So, with all that being said, I've wasted enough time. So, again, Secrets of Divine Love by A. Helwa, and this is chapter 1. Allah, the origin of love. Allah is the creator of the universe and the light of the heavens and the earth. He is the one absolute, transcendent reality that unites all differences in the ocean of his love. He is the light that inspires flowers to bloom. He is the breath of love behind the wind that undresses the trees in winter and adorns them with blossoms in spring. He is the power causing mountains to rise. He is the artist painting color into the cones of your eyes. He is the life behind all of nature. He is the one who squeezes a seed to create a tree, the one whose love changes stones into gold. It is Allah who brought you out of your mother's wombs, knowing nothing, and gave you hearing and sight and minds so that you might be thankful. Al-Quran, chapter 16, verse 78. Allah is the creator of every scientific law. He is the one who gave everything its form and function, and then guided it into the embrace of his perfect plan. Quran, chapter 20, verse 50. Allah is As-Samad, which does not just mean self-sufficient, but comes from a root that means solid, impenetrable, non-hollow. Allah is the one with no holes, no parts, no separation. Where Allah is metaphorically whole, we are nothing but holes. We are made of atoms, which are 99.99999% made of empty space. In essence, when we reach for another in existence other than Allah, we are reaching for emptiness. Nothing in this world can fill us because everything in this existence is also made of empty atoms. It is only when we reach for God that we are spiritually filled and content because He is Al-Ahad, the One, the complete, the indivisible essence that transcends numbers or parts. Allah is the forger of time, the molder of space, the weaver of souls, the turner of hearts, the one who creates everything in stages, yet is beyond the limits of time. Life is created from his breath, the cosmos forms from the vibration of his speech, and love is birthed from the womb of his mercy. He is the one who said be to the vast nothingness, and existence sprouted into being. His words inspire light to break the darkness of nothing into the dawn of life. When the sun sets, when the stars become shy, when the moon hides behind clouds, He is the light that never dies. He is not the universe. He is the breath behind the expansion of space and time. God is not what the eyes see, but He is that which gives seeing to the eyes. He is not what hands touch. He is that which inspires you to reach. God is the power behind all movement, for all in the heavens and the earth call upon Him, and every interval He is acting. At every interval He is acting. Al-Quran 55:29. He is the one who created everything in pairs. Al-Quran 51:49. So that you would come to realize that He alone is one. He is the one who is independent, and yet everything is dependent upon Him. God is the one that never dies, but deals death, the one that was never created, but creates life, the one that never gives birth, but knows what is in the womb. Al-Quran 31:34. He is the one that has no beginning, but that everything begins from, the one with no end, but that everything returns to. God did not just create you, He perpetually recreates and sustains you. Al-Quran 10:4. He wraps his love like the arms of a galaxy around every soul who comes and seeks. He sings your cells into harmony and drums your heart into a beat. He is the one that created you from water and earth. Al-Quran 23:12. The one that preferred you to his angels. Al-Quran 7:11. The one that planted a reflection of his entire universe into the soil of your spirit. Everything in existence is between his fingers of mercy. He knows all that enters the earth, all that comes out of it, all that descends from the sky, and all that ascends to it. He is all merciful and all forgiving. Al-Quran 34:2. Whether you are in a plane in the sky, in the heart of a desert, or in the depths of a sea where no light can reach, God is with you. Everyone else may leave, everything else may break, but Allah will forever be your most faithful and intimate friend. Allah is the inspiration at the heart of every lover, the beauty behind the song of a nightingale, the mathematician behind the symmetrical perfection in the fractals of nature, and the light reflected in the heart of the Prophet Muhammad alayhi salam. It is through God's majesty that the words of Jesus raised the dead. Al-Quran 5:110. It is through his power that the Red Sea was parted for Moses. Al-Quran 20:77-78. Even though we are often not aware of it, God is always blessing us with his miracles and answering our prayers. You do not need cell towers to reach God. You just need to plug into your heart because he is with you wherever you are. Al-Quran 57:4. From the closest atom to the farthest star. God's love makes the ocean shy with its depth, and his mercy makes room for every sinner that comes repentant to his door. When the world goes to sleep, God is the one who is awake with you. God sees the tears you hide with smiles, and he embraces the pain you think no one would understand. Not even an atom's weight in the heavens or the earth remains hidden from him. Al-Quran 34:3. As one unnamed mystic poetically said, God sees the black ant on a black stone in the darkest night, so how could he not see the pain of a faithful seeker? Allah sees you and everything else in existence with his perfect vision. The Quran says, and with him are the keys of the unseen treasures. None knows them but he, and he knows what is in the land in the sea. Not even a leaf falls without his knowledge, nor a grain in the darkness of the earth, or anything green nor dry, but it is all in a clear book. Al-Quran 6:59. Tell me, if a single leaf cannot fall on the entire earth without God's knowledge, how could your heart break without his healing presence embracing you? God sends hope in the most desperate moments. Don't forget the heaviest rains comes out of the darkest clouds. That was from Rumi. God's mercy is greater than your sins or circumstances. His compassionate love embraces the cactus parts of you that you swear no one could hug. His grace celebrates the parts of you that nobody claps for. God loved you before you were even created, before you even knew of him. As the Quran says, it is he who sent down tranquility into the hearts of the believers, that they may add faith to their faith, for to Allah belong the forces of the heavens and the earth, and Allah is full of knowledge and wisdom. Al-Quran 48:4. The mystery of Allah. There are countless veils between us and God, but no veils between him and us. The veils we experience between us and God are often created from misperceptions formed during our childhood that result in a distorted vision of reality. When something happens to us, good or bad, as human beings, we are inclined to frame that experience with an interpretation. How we interpret events in our life will in turn affect how we see our reality. Since our interpretations come from us and are totally subjective, if they were changed, it would change how we saw the world and God. Our experience of the world has little to do with what happens to us and everything to do with how we subconsciously or consciously choose to interpret our experiences. Therefore, our interpretations and beliefs associated with them become a barrier to fully witnessing God. Nothing, however, is veiled from God's perception. God has no blind spots or boundaries. We are not veiled due to God's distance from us, but veiled due to his proximity. Just as the life that gives us breath is so close to us that we cannot see it or touch it, the Quran declares that despite the transcendence of his essence, God is closer to us than our jugular vein. Al-Quran 50:16. God's love is intimately woven within every beat of our hearts. In fact, the Arabic word for God, Allah, begins with the ah sound, which in theories of sacred sound is the sound of manifestation, the sound we allegedly make when our hearts open. Symbolically, this sound represents the human being bursting forth from the nothingness of silence into manifested existence through God's speech. The word Allah can be seen as the same singular God that is referred to in the Torah in Hebrew as Elohim, or spoken by Jesus in Aramaic as the strikingly similar Allah. Allah is neither female nor male, for he is beyond anything in creation and transcends all the limits that the human mind can create. Since in Arabic there is not a gender-neutral pronoun such as it, Allah uses huwa, or he, in reference to himself, because in Arabic the male gender form is inclusive of the female, not exclusive. You will also find in the Quran that Allah speaks in the first person plural, referring to himself as we. This does not imply that God is more than one. Rather, in Arabic and many other languages, this denotes majesty, i.e., the royal we, that kings use when referring to their subjects. For example, a king may say, "We have decreed the following order," even if he is referring only to himself. Some commentators have also suggested that Allah says, "We created." Some commentators have also suggested that when Allah says, "We created," he is pointing to how he ordered the angels to create, all together. Regardless, when God uses the word "we" in the Quran, he often then uses a singular word to refer to himself as a means of reiterating his oneness. Allah is the meeting point of all duality and differences, for he is a singular reality. Some scholars say the word Allah is a proper name God has given himself, and thus the word cannot be linguistically broken down. Other scholars say the word Allah is derived from ilah, which in Arabic means God, and that when the definite article al is added to ilah, it creates al-ilah and translates to the God. Regardless of the linguistic origin of the word, Allah is that which unites yes with no, for in his singularity, all duality is mysteriously united. Allah is both the bridge between the unseen and seen realms and the meeting point between existence and non-existence. However, paradoxically, Allah is also the ground of polarity, both fully the manifestation of the inner al-batin and fully the manifestation of the outer al-zahir. God is outside of things, but not in the sense of being alien to them, and he is inside of things, but not in the sense of being identical with them. That was from Imam Ali. It is a result of these seemingly contradicting statements that Allah is, by definition, that which breaks the mind. As the mystics say, only God can know God, because there is none comparable to him. Al-Quran 112:4. Therefore, by definition, Allah has no opposites, and since the human mind understands the world through association and comparison, it is rendered incapable of understanding a singular God who cannot be divided into parts and is unlike any other thing known to man. Vision does not encompass him, he encompasses vision. He is above all comprehension, yet is acquainted with all things. Al-Quran 6:103. We cannot express Allah's eternal and transcendent nature with mortal tongues. We cannot shove infinity into the finite arms of 26 letters. This is why the follower of the Prophet Muhammad salam, Abu Bakr, said, "Our inability to understand God is our understanding of God." Our inability to comprehend God's infinite nature does not mean we cannot have a relationship with God. Rather, it means our experience of God begins through admitting our ignorance before his all-encompassing knowledge. It is only from a place of humility that we can begin to experience a connection with God. Like the famous novelist Leo Tolstoy said in War and Peace, "All we can know is that we know nothing, and that's the height of human wisdom." It is only when we put our ego aside and see the limited nature of our intellect that we can begin to walk on the path of faith. As Rumi beautifully says, "Sell your cleverness and buy bewilderment, for at the end of all you know is the beginning of your journey to Allah." The divine door is always open. Allah is not an old man in the sky. He is not Zeus sitting in a cloud awaiting to punish you. Allah is not Santa Claus with a naughty list from which you cannot be redeemed. Allah is the creator of the cosmos, the one whose mercy embraces all things, whose love embraces all hearts, whose hands heal all wounds, whose face is everywhere you turn, for he is with you wherever you are. Take one step towards me, I will take 10 steps towards you. Walk toward me, and I will run toward you. Allah. We may be slow in repentance, but God is swift in his mercy, generosity, forgiveness, and grace. The following interaction between two great mystical masters beautifully articulates God's mercy. The 8th century sage Salih of Qaswan said to his students, "Keep knocking on the door of Allah and never stop, for by his mercy Allah will eventually open his door for those who sincerely seek him." The mystic Rabia al-Adawiyya overheard this statement as she was walking by the mosque and said, "O Salih, who said Allah's door is closed to begin with?" Rabia understood that Allah's love is not dependent on our actions, but that it is his love that inspires us to knock to begin with. Like the sun draws the plants to turn their face in submission to its light, God calls us to turn to him so that we may grow through him. Allah is the one whose speech lifts the dead from their graves, the one who can part the seas with a staff, the one who uses your hopeless situations as a platform to perform his next miracle. He is the one that transforms your mess into a message, the one that transforms your trials into a triumph, the one who takes the victim and makes them a victor. Al-Quran 35. God is with you in the beginning, in the end, and in every moment in between. This is why the beloved grandson of the Prophet, salam, Imam Hussein, said, "O Allah, what did he find who lost you, and what did he lose who found you?" We do not worship God because God needs it. We worship God because we need it. Prayer is not you reaching out for God. It is you responding to God, who first reached out to you. It is only when our It is only when our seedling hearts submit to God's light that we can harvest the hidden fruits of love that He planted within our spirit. As the Quran says, whoever strives, strives only for his own soul, for Allah is entirely independent of all worlds. Al-Quran 29:6. No matter how many hundreds of millions of steps we take away from God, it takes just a single thought to return. As Rumi says, each moment contains 100 messages from God. To every cry of, "O God," He answers 100 times, "I am here." Do not ever think that because you cannot see God, that He cannot see you. Do not lose heart or grieve. Al-Quran 3:139. Because even in the depths of your darkest nights, your Lord is with you always, saying, "I am near." Al-Quran 2:186. He is only one, yet we always forget Him, whereas He has billions upon billions of creatures and never forgets a single one of us. God's love has no fences or borders. His love has no conditions. His love is not in a faraway heaven, but with you in the holiness of this very moment. Whereas we break our promises 1,000 times, God is always faithful. It is only through knowing how much God loves us that we can break free from our anxiety and fear about the uncontrollable and unknown future. The more we trust God's perfect wisdom, the more harmony we begin to feel in our lives. The all-encompassing peace that comes from relying entirely on God is beautifully illustrated in the following Japanese story. A samurai and the love of his life had just gotten married and were traveling by boat to their honeymoon when a huge storm hit. The samurai's wife began to tremble with fear. There was no shore in sight, and their boat looked like it would capsize at any moment. When she ran to find her husband, she found him peacefully looking out at the sea, as if the sun was out and the waves were calm. She ran up to him and yelled, "How can you be so calm when we are about to die? Do you not value your life?" When the samurai heard her say this, he pulled out his sword and put it to his wife's neck. His wife started laughing. He said, "Why are you laughing? Are you not afraid?" She said, "Because I know you love me and will never hurt me." The samurai smiled and said, "Well, I too am in the hands of the one who loves me, so how can I be afraid?" When we realize that Allah loves us beyond what can be fathomed and that He always knows what is best for us, our fear of the unknown transforms into faith. After all, as the Quran says, to Him belong the keys of the heaven and the earth. Al-Quran 39:63. When we surrender to God's will, even when things do not go as planned, we are still grateful because we know that God's plan will always be greater than our greatest dreams. So long as we remain chained to this world and everything in it, including our own desires, we can never fully feel liberated. It is only in trusting the divine and becoming a servant of Allah that the soul experiences true freedom. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim, the spiritual secrets of God's mercy. Call upon Allah or call upon the most merciful, Ar-Rahman. But whatever name you call upon Him, to Him belong the most beautiful names. Al-Quran 17:1-10. Allah calls us toward Himself through boundless mercy and grace, which embraces all of creation without discrimination. This divine compassion transcends time and space, providing for the good, the bad, and everything in between. In the 114 chapters of the Quran, 114 times Allah says Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, which can be translated as, "In the name of God, the Lord of mercy, the bestower of mercy." In Arabic, these words do not denote mercy, but also carry the qualities of love, forgiveness, aid, compassion, passion, assistance, protection, concern, tenderness, and forgiveness. Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim are both derived from the word Rahima, which refers to being merciful, loving, and caring in a way that benefits the object of the affection. In other words, God is making us, the creation, the emphasis of His infinite grace and most loving qualities. While Ar-Rahim is seen as God's qualities of love and mercy in action, Ar-Rahman is God's nature of mercy, love, and grace. Ar-Rahim is a specific Ar-Rahim is a specified form of mercy that is given to those who open their hearts to God, longing for the light of His love, whereas Ar-Rahman shines upon all of creation without discrimination. Both Ar-Rahim and Ar-Rahman originate from the Arabic word Rah, meaning womb. This implies that we can only experience the truth of God's message from the all-embracing womb of His mercy, love, compassion, and grace. Ar-Rahman is seen as the mother of all the divine names, for it is through the all-encompassing womb of God's Rahman that the universe was manifested into being. In Arabic, the word Rahman is known as a Sigatul Mugalaga, or hyperbole, which refers to a word that is excessive and extraordinary. For example, atash is a word you would use to say you are thirsty, but the form atshan means you are desperately thirsty. Another example would be the word qadib, which is used to say you are angry, but the form qadban means you are infuriated with anger. In this case, rahma means mercy, but the form Rahman is an extreme, infinite form of mercy that is beyond what can be understood by the human mind. Some grammarians also have said that the word Rahman linguistically implies that it is happening in the here and now. In other words, Allah is loving, caring, and merciful, not just in a general sense, but in this very moment right now. Allah emphasizes His name, the most merciful, Ar-Rahman, over His name, the most loving, Al-Wadud, because Rahman is an all-encompassing and present in all places and times. Love is not separate, but enfolded into the meaning Ar-Rahman. Limitless is your Lord in His mercy. Al-Quran 6:147. Allah's Rahman is like the sky. It covers everything in existence, including us and the worst of our sins. We were created from Allah's mercy, and the Quran was sent like a ladder from heaven to earth so that we could get closer to the divine. Allah has opened the door for us. It is up to us whether we walk into the palace of His mercy and love. The importance of divine justice. It is important to understand that God's mercy and justice go hand in hand. The word for justice in Arabic is adl, which at its root means to proportion, to create symmetry, to be equitable. In other words, harmony and balance are dependent on justice. Jewish mystics metaphorically describe God's justice as scalding hot water that, if poured on its own into a clay vessel, would break it. God's mercy is described as freezing cold water. If poured on its own into a clay vessel, it would also break it. But if you pour them together, a neutralizing balance is created, preventing the vessel from breaking. The clay vessel in this story is a metaphor for the human heart, which is unable to contain only God's mercy or only God's justice. If God was only merciful, there would be chaos on earth because there would be no accountability. However, if God was only just, there would be no one on earth because no human being is perfect. As the Quran says, If God were to punish people for their deeds immediately, not one creature would have survived on earth. However, He has given them a respite for any appointed time, and when their term comes to an end, let it be known that God watches over His servants. Al-Quran 35:45. It is in bringing together God's justice and mercy that the possibility for harmony is created. God's mercy gives us more than we deserve. If, if justice is giving you what you deserve, then mercy is when you are given more than you deserve or could ever earn. By virtue of His infinite generosity, Allah is always looking to multiply the rewards for our good deeds and minimize our wrongs. As the Quran says, whoever brings a good deed, he shall have 10 like it, and whoever brings an evil deed, he should be recompensed only with the like of it, and they shall not be dealt with unjustly. Al-Quran 6:160. Despite the countless displays of God's unending mercy, some people still proclaim that God is unjust. However, God, by His very definition, cannot be unjust to us. Justice is when you get exactly what you deserve. But what can we earn in relationship to a God who needs nothing and gives us everything? Can you pray enough to the one who gave you a tongue, a mouth, a body, and an existence? How can God be unjust if He takes something from you when He is the owner of everything in existence, including you? God is not unjust. It is we who are unjust. We are the ones who withhold from God what He already owns. As the Quran says, it is we who have wronged ourselves with choices that we have made. Al-Quran 7:23. It is not God who oppresses us. God makes this clear when He says, O my servants, I have forbidden oppression for myself, and I have made it forbidden amongst you, so do not oppress one another. We must remember that everything we do, say, or give to Allah already belongs to Him. God doesn't owe us a single thing, and yet He constantly gives to us, breathes life into us, loves and cares for us, not because of who we are, but because of how merciful and loving He is. Allah is love. Allah is the origin and the cause of love. Allah never stops loving you because His love is eternal and has no beginning or end. Love is not something Allah does. Love is something Allah is. You cannot separate love from Allah any more than you can separate water from the ocean. We can respond to Allah's love by loving and worshiping Him, but our unwillingness to honor Allah does not affect His divine qualities, as Allah is entirely independent of all creatures. Al-Quran 3:97. Whereas the human being can be kind, God is kindness, ar-Rauf. Where we can be merciful, God is mercy, ar-Rahman. God is not just peaceful, He is peace, as-Salam. God's loving qualities do not change in response to our choices because God is not reactive. He is the cause of everything in existence. The Prophet ﷺ explains that if every single human on earth reached the height of spiritual piety, or if they were all the worst in existence, it would not add or take away anything from Allah's sovereignty. The Prophet ﷺ continues to say that if Allah chose to fulfill the prayer of every single human being at once, it would not decrease what Allah has any more than a needle decreases what is in the ocean when it is put into it. As the 20th century theologian C.S. Lewis said, a man can no more diminish God's glory by refusing to worship Him than a lunatic can put out the sun by scribbling the word darkness on the walls of his cell. Allah's love for us never diminishes. What changes is our ability to be receptive to divine love. In fact, the word hate does not exist in the Quran in relation to Allah. The English translation of God hates can more accurately be translated as God does not love, which implies that our experience of Allah is always on the spectrum of love. The variation in this spectrum occurs not because Allah is withholding from us, but because of our forgetfulness and the veils that result from our misperceptions, false identities, and sins. Just as the sun doesn't stop shining if we close our eyes, when we sin, it is not that God hates us, but rather we who are closed off from the experiencing His love. Moonlight floods the whole sky from horizon to horizon. How much it can fill the room depends on its windows. Rumi. Allah loves and provides for whom He wills without accounting. Al-Quran 3:37. So if we feel limitations, they exist in the containment of our receiving and not in the outpouring of His giving. Some linguists say that the word Allah is based on the word waliha, which translates to a love that is so passionate and ecstatic that it completely transcends the senses. This implies that to know God, we have to surrender our minds, everything we are, and everything we know in exchange for love, because self-surrender to divine love is the only path to God. Unlike the angels, we have been given the gift of not only knowing of love, but becoming it. Since Allah is the origin of all love, to know Him you must drown in the essence of love. To know Him you must be empty of yourself entirely, for love leaves no witnesses. How can there be two with the one? We must stop trying to understand with our limiting minds what the heart already knows. As Rumi says, I looked in temples, churches, and mosques, but I found the divine in my heart. In this poem, Rumi reminds us that God is most brilliantly reflected in the mirror of the spiritual heart, which is the seat of consciousness. God transcends the human mind. God is limitless. It is our vision of God that is limited to the qualities we seek in the world and reflect within our own existence. Since we see the world through the filter of how we see ourselves, we come to know God through His qualities that we actualize through Him within our own being. Allah says, I am as my servant thinks I am, because we see Allah not as He is, but through the lens of our finite mind. If we tune into God's love, mercy, compassion, and kindness, then we draw those qualities out of existence and see God through those faces. The Creator meets us with the qualities we meet His creation with. Therefore, next time, instead of only praying for justice when others wrong you, consider praying for Allah's mercy upon them as well. Be merciful to those on the earth, and the one above the heavens will have mercy upon you. The Prophet Muhammad, alayhi salam. Although we are given the gift as human beings to be a reflection of God on earth, our experience of a divine name is still infinitely different from God. For example, we can only understand the quality of God's all-encompassing sight, al-Basir, in relationship to our own ability to see. But God's vision is completely incomprehensible. As Imam Ali says, He sees even when there is none to be looked at from among His creation. Sorry, my phone messed up. Okay, let me go back. For example, we can only understand the quality of God's all-encompassing sight, al-Basir, in relationship to our own ability to see. But God's vision is completely incomprehensible. As Imam Ali says, He sees even when there is none to be looked at from among His creation. Allah sees all things in existence without eyes, without the need for light, corneas, colors, or irises. Allah sees without the need for contrast or duality. He sees sound, smell, and love. Whereas our hearing requires eardrum and air for sound to travel through, Allah's hearing, Asami, is beyond sound waves. Whereas our life is dependent on a beating heart and a working brain, Allah has no beginning or end. Allah lit the candle of our mortal existence, but the light of his being is beyond existence. Allah's qualities are beyond human words. Whatever you think concerning Allah, know that He is different from that. Ibn Ata'Allah al-Iskandari, 13th century mystic. The life of Allah reaches beyond breaths, beyond what can be captured by mortal hands or calculated by human brains. As Rumi says, the language of God is silence. All else is poor translation. Whereas words limit the interpretation of God to the confines of human language, silence carries infinite possibilities. As the teacher of Rumi, the mystic Shams Tabrizi said, intellect takes you to the door, but it doesn't take you into the house. Despite all divinely sent prophets constantly calling humankind to not seek God solely with the mind, human beings have never stopped searching for a God they can touch and see directly. Islam does not ignore this inclination, but rather uses the same rational thought to challenge it. A mystic master once asked, "How can I see God?" The master told the questioner, "Look at the sun." The seeker looked towards the sun, but after a few seconds squinted in pain and said, "I can't, it's burning my eyes." The master then replied, "You can't even look at the sun without going blind, and you want to see the creator of the sun?" The seeker then asked, "Then tell me, great master, where is God?" The master asked the seeker, "Do you know where in the galaxy the earth is orbiting in this moment? Do you even know where you are to ask where the one who created place resides? When we cannot even place ourselves relative to the universe, how can we attempt to place a formless God in relationship to an existence he completely transcends? When our eyes cannot see themselves, or our teeth cannot bite themselves, when we cannot even fully experience our own senses, how can we expect to be able to fully experience the one who created those senses? The human mind will always venture to limit God's omnipresent, transcendent, and mysterious nature into a form or formula that can be understood. Rumi metaphorically remarks on this inclination through the following poem. The truth was a mirror in the hands of God. It fell and broke into pieces. Everybody took a piece of it, and they looked at it and thought they had the truth. There are no images or idols in Islam, so that man doesn't limit God to a form. Nonetheless, true monotheism is not just belief in a single God, but the ability to see a reflection of God in everything for everything is infused and animated through the love of God. The Quran speaks to God's infinite and incomprehensible knowledge by declaring the following. And if all the trees in the earth were pens, and the sea with 7 more seas to help it were ink, the words of Allah could not be exhausted. Allah is exalted in might and wise. Al-Quran 31:27. How the universe points to God. Since the universe has a beginning, and something that has a beginning cannot come from nothing, it is rational to assume that the universe has a creator. The ancient Bedouins would say that just as camel droppings in the desert would tell them that camels passed by, and footsteps in the sand were proof that a creature had walked by, the earth's many valleys, mountains, oceans, and constellations point to the existence of a creator. As the Quran says, then do they look at the camels, how they are created, and at the sky, how it is raised, and at the mountains, how they were erected, and at the earth, how it is spread out? Al-Quran 88:17-20. When we look at a book, a plane, building, or even a wristwatch, we see a sign of intelligence far beyond the scope of chance. Our planet is specifically designed to harbor life with such precision that it is beyond the grasp of probability that out of chaos and pure randomness such order would arise. The possibility of life lies in astonishingly narrow perimeters. Our life depends on the proximity of the earth to the sun, the tilt of the earth and the speed at which it revolves, the amount of oxygen in the air, the existence of our atmosphere, the thickness of the earth's crust, and countless other equations that in some cases must be as precise as 120 decimal places. In fact, the constants within the equations of science are so fine-tuned that the world-renowned theoretical physicist Stephen Hawking said in his book, A Brief History of Time, that the laws of science, as we know them at present, contain many fundamental numbers, like the size of the electric charge of the electron and the ratio of the masses of the proton and the electron. The remarkable fact is that the values of these numbers seem to have been very finely adjusted to make possible the development of life. As brilliant and awe-inspiring as the discoveries of science can be, they can only ever speak to how things work in our universe, while God addresses why things exist. Nonetheless, science can be seen as a great ally of faith because the scientific method, which was pioneered by Muslim physicist Ibn al-Haytham, helps to unveil the power and wisdom of God that is hidden within the created world through the God-given intellect of man. However, the intellect of man can only go so far in explaining the world we live in. The following quote beautifully articulates this notion. The first gulp from the glass of natural sciences will turn you into an atheist, but of the bottom of the glass, God is waiting for you. Werner Heisenberg, pioneer of quantum physics. It was not until the 20th century that the scientific community confirmed certain claims made by the Quran more than 1400 years ago. For example, the Quran speaks about water being the core substance of all living things, Al-Quran 21:30. The human embryonic development, Al-Quran 23:12-14. The universe not being static but expanding, Al-Quran 51:47. And the sun and the moon having their own individual orbits, Al-Quran 21:33. Nonetheless, it is important to understand that since scientists cannot account for every single variable in a given experiment, science can only make predictions and suggest theories about the universe and the created world. Whereas belief in God is seen as an innate natural inclination of every human being, science is traditionally based in speculation and cannot prove something with 100% certainty. In the Quran, Allah constantly calls us to contemplate and reflect upon the natural world, but we must be careful to not make our intellect an idol before God. The universe having an origin, the fine-tuned nature of existence, and scientific accuracies within the Quran are powerful truths to contemplate. But belief in God is not something we acquire merely through reading or intellectual understanding. The Quran states that belief in God has been placed in the heart of every single human being. You do not have to find God. You just have to be receptive to His truth with an open mind and humble heart. God guides to Himself whoever turns to Him. Al-Quran 13:27. Sincere submission is the only path to God. If we seek God through arrogance, through thinking we are superior because of our knowledge, success, or wealth, we will not only be veiled from the signs of God, but we will find justification for our belief. This is because arrogance leads to spiritual blindness and creates separation and hierarchy. As a result, the arrogant cannot reach God because he can only be known through the door of oneness. As God himself says, I will turn away from my signs those who are arrogant upon the earth without right. And if they would see every sign, they would not believe in it. And if they see the way of consciousness, they will not adopt it as a way. But if they see the way of error, they will adopt it as a way. That is because they have denied our signs and they were heedless of them. Al-Quran 7:146. It is not information in the form of words that results in belief, but rather the truth of faith is unveiled when we open the eyes of our heart through humility to the light of God. The light of the truth is hidden within the words of revelation and divine signs reflected in the creation and is assessed through gratitude and humble reverence of God. It is through divine grace and the fostering of gratitude and humility that our vision is widened, making us receptive to receive the divine inspiration behind the many miracles of God that already surround us. After all, we live on a planet graced with seas and trees, floating in space around a ball of fire that creates the day, and a moon that creates the waves. And still, some days we say God doesn't exist. The Quran asks, who provides for you from the sky and the earth? Who is it that has power over hearing and sight? And who is it that brings out the living from the dead and the dead from the living? And who is it that rules and regulates all affairs? They will say, Allah. Then say, will you not then be mindful of them? Al-Quran 10:31. If every book has an author and every building has an architect, then how can we look at all this intricate perfection and say that it has no creator? As the Quran says, it is he who has created 7 heavens, one above the other. You cannot see any fault in the creation of the universally merciful. Look again. Do you see any fault? Al-Quran 67:3. The Quran calls us to contemplate natural phenomena, so that through observing the intricate mystery of creation, we can logically conclude that such precision is not an outcome of random chance. The greatest evidence of God is not in what the eyes can capture, but in what completely bewilders and transcends the eyes. Just as we cannot directly see black holes in space, but have evidence of their existence due to how their gravity affects the surrounding matter and light, we cannot see Allah, but the greatest evidence of His existence is our existence. From nothing, nothing comes. After all, 0 plus 0 plus 0 will never give you 1. Al-Quran 52:35-36. Mystics throughout time have said that they believe in God like they believe in light, not because they can see light, but because through it they see everything else. Who created God? It's important not to fall into the trap of thinking, if God created the universe, then who created God? Because that results in infinite regress. We must understand that God and the universe are vastly different. From the vantage point of our physical reality, time, matter, and space are seen as a continuum and that they came into existence simultaneously. If you had matter but not space, where would you put the matter? If you had matter but not time, when would you place it? Since time, matter, and space were all seemingly created together, whatever created the universe must, by definition, transcend all limitations of the created world of forms. The Quran depicts this perfectly because Allah describes Himself as one who is beyond time, space, and any forms or limitations, for Allah has power over all things. Al-Quran 24:45. Since God is eternal and has no beginning, then we can reason that He would have no creator, because there was no moment in which God was not present to have been created. Thus, he alone is the uncreated creator. Without him, nothing would have been created. How to have an intimate connection with God. In a world that is constantly changing, it is comforting to know that our God is the same today as he was yesterday and will be tomorrow. In accepting God's essence as being undifferentiated, infinite, and unlike anything in creation, we must not make the mistake of thinking that God is too big or transcendent to have an intimate relationship with a being as small as ourselves. The question then becomes, how can we have a relationship with a God who cannot be known, seen, or touched directly? We cannot know God as he is, but we can experience his qualities indirectly through the creations he chose to create. Similar to what happens when white light hits a prism and spreads out to unveil the color spectrum, when the light of the name Allah pierces the dense prism of creation, it manifests into the spectrum of divine names. Like white light that carries all colors within its singularity, the name Allah carries the infinite divine names within its oneness. However, since singularity, unity, and oneness cannot entirely be comprehended by the human mind, Allah reflected his singularity into the multiplicity of creation through the manifestation of his divine names. Everything in creation is created from a unique recipe of Allah's names. Similar to how all physical matter is broken apart into chemical elements that are organized into a periodic table, the divine names form a table in the spiritual dimension that allows us to experience an infinite God, one name at a time. Allah describes himself numerous times in the Quran with seemingly conflicting names. He introduces himself as the living, Al-Hayy, the most kind, or Rauf, and the infinitely generous, Al-Karim. He also introduces himself as the bringer of death, Al-Mumit, the reducer, Al-Khafid, and the dishonorer, Al-Mutil. Allah's names are not contradictory, but rather complement one another. Allah is the expander, Al-Basit, the one who opens our hearts to the light of grace. And he is the constrictor, Al-Qabid, the one who closes the doors that will lead us astray. He is the avenger, Al-Mutaqim, the one who confronts our egos and seeks to balance the scales of justice through accountability. He is the great forgiver, Al-Ghafur, the one who covers our sins with the veil of his perfection and protects us from the consequences of our choices. He is the harmer, Ad-Dar, the one who severs the bonds we have made with self-destructive desires. He is the beneficial, An-Nafi, the one who shines upon the seeds of faith within us, helping us blossom into the greatest possible version of ourselves. The qualities of Allah can be generally categorized as either a Jamal or a Jalal quality. Jamal, or Allah's qualities of beauty, must often correspond to the ease that comes from his blessings. Jalal, or Allah's qualities of majesty, relate to the difficulty and pain we experience as Allah purifies and polishes the mirrors of our hearts. Although many people struggle with the Jalal faces of God, they are necessary on the path of spiritual progress. Just as the human being cannot see in pure light or pure darkness, but light and dark must blend and interlace for visions to awaken, the Jamal and the Jalal complement each other on the path of knowing and experiencing God. Say, Lord, owner of the kingdom, you give authority to whomever you want and take it away from whomever you want. You honor whom you will, and you humble whom you will. In your hands is all virtue, and you have power over all things. You cause the day to enter into the night, and the night to enter into the day. You cause the living to come out of the dead, and the dead to come out of the living. You give sustenance to whomever you want without measure. Al-Quran 3:26 to 27. The qualities of God perfectly balance one another. Just as when we break a bone, the doctor may have to break the bone again to set it. Sometimes Allah may choose to break aspects of our ego through His Jalal qualities to create the conditions for healing through His Jamal qualities. It can also be said that the qualities of Allah's Jalal polish the heart so that the qualities of His Jamal can be reflected. We may have a preference towards ease, but in a spiritual sense, there is no difference between Jamal and Jalal because both represent a face of God. It's important to remember that we do not only experience Allah's qualities on the spiritual plane, but they are also manifested in all of physical creation. We can see Allah's power, Al-Jabbar, reflected in the ocean. We can feel His mercy, Ar-Rahman, through the rain. We can experience His love, Al-Wadud, through a mother holding her child. We can see His majesty, Al-Jalil, reflected in the stars. We can see His gentleness, Al-Latif, in the petals of a rose. Every time we see, we experience an element of God's infinite sight, Al-Basir. Every time we hear, we experience the quality of God's all-encompassing hearing, Asami. In birth, we see God's quality of life, Al-Hay. And in death, we witness God's power to take life, Al-Mumit. From inside of us to the farthest edges of the universe, we see infinite faces of God's grace, painted with the colors of His names in every atom that He chose to create. Just as every artist is reflected in their artworks, but is not the artwork itself, God is reflected in what He creates, but is not limited by His creation. To God belongs the East and the West. Wherever you turn, there is the face of God. Al-Quran 2:115. Here the word face does not mean God has a face like a human being because God is formless and beyond time and space. The word face in this verse is metaphorical and refers to God's essence, Al-Tat, and how it is mysteriously reflected in all of creation. Allah's omnipresence in all things is reiterated when the Quran says, He is the first and the last, and the outward and the inward, and He has knowledge of everything. Al-Quran 57:3. At any moment, what we experience in this world of forms is a three-dimensional reflection of God's names, projected through the mirror of our existence. Essentially, human beings and everything else in creation, both seen and unseen, exist as a reflection of God's qualities in the mirror of the universe. If, for a single moment, Allah turned away the face of His mercy from the mirror of this world, everything would disappear because nothing would exist without Him continually sustaining it. Allah is Al-Hay, the living, the one who inspires all life into being. Allah is Al-Qayyum, the self-subsisting, the one everything is dependent on. We are not God, just as the image in a mirror is not the one facing it. But like a mirror, our existence points to the divine. Similar to how the sun rises upon a horizon, but it is not part of the horizon. God's light is reflected in creation, but is not owned by the creation. Every tree, child, star, galaxy, and atom carries a reflection of God's qualities beneath the limitation of its form. Since everything originates from Allah and everything returns to Allah, there is nothing that is ultimately separate from the knowledge and love of Allah, for all of creation is completely dependent and sustained by Allah. Nothing I say can explain to you divine love, yet all of creation cannot seem to stop talking about it. Rumi. Just as love cannot be seen or truly known, but is undeniably felt, we can experience our Lord in places our mind could never travel or comprehend. Seek out these placeless places where the unknown resides. Reflect upon the mysteries of life. Travel into spaces with no familiar ground. Venture into realms where worldly compasses fail to lead you. Walk into the quantum world, where laws of science seemingly fail to work, and feel the vulnerability of your ignorance. Lean into the divinity that is hidden within everything. Break every wall of known knowledge. Do not seek to know, seek to be in awe of the infinite nature of God. This is where you can experience your Lord. This is where you can be most aware that you will never know Allah as He truly is, and yet every moment of every day it is His breath that is mysteriously creating the life inside you. My Lord, help me surrender all that I am, so that I can receive all that you seek to give me. Allah, help me to lay down the burden of doubt and to walk freely in faith, trusting that your plans for me will always be greater than my greatest dreams. Allah, forgive me for the mistakes I have made and the mistakes I will make. My Lord, please remind me that your goodness will always be greater than my faults, and that your love will always be greater than my shame. O Allah, shine your light upon me so that my eyes can awaken to your truth, and so that my heart can be illuminated by the reflection of your beauty. In your subtle names I pray. Ameen. And so that is the conclusion of chapter 1. Now, I forgot to mention that there are reflections at the end of I think at the end of each chapter. And so there are like exercises to do, I suppose. And I guess other sorts of reflections also on the previous chapter that was read. I'm not going to go into this because my hope is that, well, one, I think it's something that has to be done individually. But also, my hope is that you will go on ahead and get this book. I do want to apologize for the for the several times that I kind of stumbled upon words. I didn't realize that it was going to take so long to read the chapter, and I didn't bring anything to sort of lubricate the throat. And so I thought to bring some tea, but I didn't. So hopefully next time will be better. But even more, hopefully, my intentions really is to put this book out there for both of us, all of us, to learn together and really hopefully get a deeper perspective on the Creator and how we can strengthen our relationship with the Creator, because just in a nutshell, without trying to get all deep or whatever, I think it's important for us to do so. I think that's the main point of us being here in this earth, and I think it is a great reason why there's so much sickness and anxiety and loneliness and all those things that's going on right now. So please, after you listen to this, please let me know how I did. So if it's just so crazy and wacky, I will just go back, erase this or delete this video, and then do it again. Hopefully better. I'm going to stumble over some words. It just is. Reading aloud for an hour is a little bit difficult. So with all that being said, thank you so much, and until next time. Peace.